Here he is from the Morning News, Cowboys beat writer Joseph Hoyt. And a good afternoon, sir. How the heck are you?
I'm doing well, fellas. How are you doing?
We're doing wonderful. Thanks for joining us. How urgently do you get the feeling right now the Cowboys are looking to make a trade to help this defense?
I don't get the sense that it's urgent, but I feel like there's intrigue there. I get the vibe that, with 3 weeks ago from yesterday, that they recognize that, that there have been some problems, but I think that they keep offering the caveat of reinforcements being on the way, that help is on the way. And, it's a lot of pressure to put on DeMarvion Overshone and some of these other guys coming off, maybe a Perrion Winfrey in a couple of weeks. But right now their defense, it is what it is, guys. Number one ranked offense, arguably in the NFL, worst ranked defense, something's got to give there, right? And I think if they don't see improvement or some of these reinforcements kind of don't give them the artillery power that they were hoping for, you might see the gambler get the itch again, which is kind of something I wrote in yesterday's column, was that, the words that Jerry Jones is using are kind of similar to what he was talking about when he was inspired this offseason, rewatching his documentary about, being able to cut and shoot with some of the draft picks from the Herschel Walker trade. He has some draft picks now. He has the ability to cut and shoot. Now let's see if he takes advantage of the opportunity, if there's a need there in his mind.
Joseph, where did they miss this the most?
Could you repeat that, Brian?
Where did they miss this the most? Where did they misevaluate this the most?
In terms of just the entire operation?
Of defense.
I think right now it's just personnel. Not matching scheme, frankly. And I know that they want to be multiple, and I know that they do run some fire zones with some man match stuff kind of there. But, I think right now you have two corners that are highly paid that don't have pass breakups, that don't have interceptions, that, aren't really kind of fitting their system, that have voiced their opinion of, hey, we kind of want to do some things that fit us more, and that's not working. I also think you kind of have to look at the linebacker play. And, you watch some of that film from Carolina, and, defensive linemen are getting pushed all over the place, right? But, I think some of these linebackers just kind of haven't been making the impact in terms of filling the holes like they would hope. Obviously Sanborn was out this past week. But you kind of go back and watch some of these plays like Kenneth Murray and Jamar James, and there's things that they're missing. And I think too, Eberflus obviously is going to get a lot of credit for where they are right now defensively. That's what the head man gets, right? But Brian Schottenheimer pointed out too, that opening play, they thought they had something schemed up really good.
Yeah, they did.
Wanye Thomas is at the line of scrimmage, able to make a tackle, and he just doesn't. Next, Rico Dowdle gets 9 yards, and the rest is history, right? So I think there's, when anything looks as bad as it has defensively, there's multiple things wrong. You can point to the lead man, but they've got some things to figure out for sure on that defensive side.
Yeah, it might be a tough question to answer here, Joe, but like being around the team, and I saw Calvin wrote some articles as well about is there any losing of faith or belief in Flus? Is that something where maybe some players just are like, I'm not really buying what you're selling here right now, man?
Yeah, I think, that it's always kind of hard to really pinpoint, right? But I do think there's elements, and I think you go back to the Trayvon Diggs asking to play more man defense, and when we asked Matt Eberflus about it, he kind of said, hey, thanks for the feedback. We appreciate it, right? And next thing you know, they're not running a lot of man defense after that. So I think when those things happen, when guys feel like they're not being put in the best position to succeed, questions kind of start emerging, right? And then I think that's something that can inherently happen when things are going wrong. I think a lot of people are, when it's this bad, frankly, I think a lot of people start pointing fingers, internally, and some start doing it externally. And, I think when that kind of starts to stack on top of each other, sure, I think belief can start to be lost and confidence can kind of drop. And that's something Brian Schottenheimer talked about. That was the confidence is kind of at an alarming level right now in the defense, and they got to pick it up.
Hey, Joe, I have a question about the locker room, and maybe has any player you have contact with off the record told you that, yeah, we're an absolute mess?
Off the record, I think people have kind of indicated that there are issues abound. I think I would say that.
Sure. Okay. So I just wonder, some players know, they have to say all the right things and all that and can't blame anybody, but sometimes they pull you aside and say, hey, we're an effing mess here right now. That kind of thing.
I think you go back to honestly what Trayvon Diggs told Calvin after the game. And that's just, we don't have identity right now, frankly. And that's, on record. And I think, and obviously Trayvon's been really willing to talk with us. I think, going back to, after the incident in San Francisco, he's actually been one of the better media guys that we've had a chance to talk with. he's the guy that will make his opinion known. And I think right now he's making it known that they don't have a true identity, and that can lead to questions for sure.
Do you get the feeling that George Pickens wants to remain a Cowboy?
I asked him that explicitly today, and he's like, I wouldn't mind it. And I think I asked also Jerry Jones that same question yesterday, and the first thing that kind of is out of his mouth was that, hey, there's a competitive market for these things, right? I think, the Cowboys have him under control, right? But at the rate he's going right now, this is a guy that's value keeps going up. And, what do we know about free agency? That's a way to test that value. That's a way to see what your market is. And right now, if he keeps answering the questions and the narratives that kind of persisted about him prior to this with the way he's been performing on the field and off the field, I think this is a guy that's going to have high value. And so, you kind of go back to a little bit, that's where some of the discontent with Micah Parsons was, right? In Athletes First, and who also represents George Pickens. They wanted to make sure they got the full market value because they believed that it was a certain level, and the Cowboys kind of believed it was at another level. And so I think right now that, everyone's kind of enjoying the fact that they're 6 games into what's been a very successful trade for the Dallas Cowboys. I think, George Pickens says, I don't want to look too far in the future. Jerry says, this is better than expected. We might have to open up some money for the second wide receiver spot if we're going to pay him that high. I think, there's positives for both directions, but until this thing gets into a negotiation or a franchise tag gets applied, which we could see this offseason with George Pickens, it's really hard to pinpoint what his, actual long-term future is, whether it's in Dallas or not.
This is something we've chatted about. I know Brian's asked us, but what do you think happens at receiver on Sunday if you do have CeeDee Lamb back and then Jonathan Mingo makes his debut? What happens with Flanoy and Tolbert? I mean, is anybody you think inactive?
Yeah, I think that, with Tolbert, I think we kind of know what Tolbert's going to be, right, in terms of this is a guy that they believe they can give him a job, and they believe strongly that he can do it, whether that job's actually catching passes or blocking. And, obviously all those things are always up for external debate, but this is someone that they believe that he will handle the job. I don't see him losing a ton of snaps right now. And I know that Flanoy has kind of been the productive guy there. So, I mean, he's definitely going to push him in regards to that. But I don't know if I see any of those guys inactive, maybe. That's kind of, my mind hasn't really gone fully to who might be inactive amongst that list, because Ryan right now is kind of playing too consistent, I think, to take him off the field for a long period of time. I mean, he's been a guy that has made plays for Dak Prescott. So, I think it'll be interesting to see. I think it is worth noting, Mingo did have, not multiple setbacks. He did miss multiple practices last week.
Sure.
He was on the practice field today. They still have a week on that 21-day window. I'm curious to see if they actually open it up. All signs with the Jalen Crawford move would indicate that's the move. But I still think we'll see if it actually happens.
It's Joseph Hoyt of the Morning News here with you on 105.3 The Fan. Okay, on George Pickens, could you give him the big contract and get the defense fixed in the same offseason?
I think you could start making waves on getting the defensive fix, because I think that's where your high draft pick should go. It depends on where the Cowboys end up, but I think that there are some linebackers in this class that could be immediate impact kind of guys for this defense. And I know it's easy to say because you might have said the same thing about Shamar James, Maris Leofau, other guys that you've drafted previously, and we're still trying to figure out exactly what their role and what their potential is. But I think that you can do things defensively, I think, in the draft to help instant impact while also retaining George Pickens. Because my mind keeps going back to this, guys. If they lose George Pickens, they are on the search for wide receiver 2 once again, right? This is something they were going to address in the draft with Tetero McMillan if he was there. Once he was gone, they pivoted, and credit to them, they pivoted to a good option that has, paid off extreme dividends for them. But if you lose George Pickens, or, if things go awry, you're back out there searching for a complement to CeeDee Lamb once again. And so I think, honestly, in terms of priority stuff, I know that they're going to have to overhaul the defense. I was talking with some of the other reporters after the game, and I was asking them, how many guys on this defense are back next year starting? And I think, we're talking 3 or 4. There's going to be an overhaul there, and I think that's something you can do through the draft mostly, and maybe with some veterans in free agency that can help round things out to help the system that's in place.
That is an exciting idea. If only 3 or 4 starters would be back, a lot of opportunity for change.
Yeah, no doubt.
But I mean, they got to worry about the Commanders right now, leading the league at 5.5 yards per rushing attempt. Is this a game, do you think, that's going to get ugly on run defense, and you're going to have to push maybe into the mid 30s or even 40s to get a win?
Yeah, I do. I think right now there's 6 weeks in, you kind of start to know who teams are, right? We're talking about the identity on defense. Well, right now the identity is giving up points in big plays in different ways. And I think right now the identity on offense is a team that's going to score a lot with Dak Prescott playing some of the best football of his career right now. I think he's been fantastic. I think his command of the offense has been incredible. I just think, even with all the shuffling on the offensive line, the way he's been able to read where pressures are going to come and kind of mitigate those things and use the mobility he does have to kind of move around the pocket and make plays. I kind of equate him to Dr. Strange right now, where he knows outcomes before they happen. So I think right now, the guarantees are the things that are certain in my mind. The Cowboys are going to score a lot of points and they're going to give a lot of points. So I just foresee them having to score 35, 40 points just like they have at home to have a chance to even win this game.
How upset and have you gotten over what happened with your Ducks against Indiana?
Yeah, I think I put a lot of stock in the idea that we went undefeated and we're the number one team in the country going into the playoff last year, and then got our butts kind of handed to us by Ohio State and Chip Kelly and that offense. And, I think, hey, if that didn't work and translate to a big CFP run, maybe a learning lesson, a reality check midseason might help. I'll tell you what, though, I had a lot of – I was seeing Fernando Mendoza kind of, talk about him being a first-round pick, and I was like, are you sure? This is the guy from Cal? It's Indiana? I'm not sure, but I'll tell you what, man, that's a guy who just gets the ball out and puts it in accurate positions very, very often. Not the biggest arm, not the biggest kind of, playmaking ability, but I'm very curious to see what scouts say about him, because he's a guy that just makes plays, man.
Joe, final question for you as we get this text says we're a mess. A midseason trade isn't going to fix it, and I tend to agree with that. But if you told me multiple trades could fix it, do you think there's a possibility that they make a legit more of an all-in push here to fix this thing, or is it going to be like trying to sort of wade their way into those waters?
I think it is a tough question, right? Because I feel like the odds and probably history would tell you that's not the case, but. I could see them. Todd Archer asked Jerry yesterday, hey, in 2018, you made Amari Cooper that trade, right? And jolted your offense and was a big need, and look what happened there. Could you do that here? And he didn't shoot that down. And I think that Jerry's kind of, like I said, I think he's been inspired by his documentary to at least have the potential to kind of make some moves, make some gambles, and make some plays. I wouldn't be surprised to see them to make a trade at the deadline, of a more big impact than maybe just a marginal kind of fringe starter for them.
Well, I'll drink to that, sir. Thank you for your fine work and your coverage of this thing, and we'll look forward to catching up with you soon.
Sounds good. Take care, fellas.